Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink programme. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. Coming up, celebrated chef Jean-Georges Vongerichten joins us in the studio to discuss his latest opening, ABC Kitchens. Also on the programme, our in-house wine expert Chloé Lake crowns her Wine of the Month. Plus, we learn about new book Sift, which examines the art of baking on a granular level. All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. French chef Jean-Georges Vongerichten rose to fame thanks to his New York restaurants, which opened in the 1990s, but nowadays he's behind many more locations across the world. His decade-long career has been studded with accolades and has made him an enduring name in the exclusive club of world-famous chefs. From Singapore to Sao Paulo, the 60-odd restaurants he runs today all share his meticulous approach to both flavour and style and are proof of his penchant for entrepreneurialism. ABC Kitchens inside London's The Emery Hotel is the latest opening to join the ranks. Here, the menu is both vegetable-leaning and Latin American-inspired. So what led this Alsace-born chef to cook this kind of food? I sat down with Jean-Georges in the studio to find out more and discuss his years in the kitchen.
We started ABC Kitchens about probably 14 years ago. On the second ABC was ABC Cocina, which is more Latino. So the first one was farm to table. We're close to the market, only was all about using local farmers and all sustainable food, small boat fishermen, small farm for some meat and mostly vegetables. And then a couple of years after we opened our Latino ABC Cocina, which is based on Spain, but more Spain, like traveling to South America, from Puerto Rico down to Mexico to all over South America. And then the third ABC was about 7 years ago, which is all vegan, vegetarian. So we decided to combine all three ABC and do ABC Kitchens. So the project started about probably 4 years ago. We talked about bringing ABC Kitchens to London at the Emery Hotel. I think it was the last Richard Rogers project, one of the last one. And it's a beautiful new kind of build. Only makes sense to bring something different to London.
It's wonderful, and I wonder how much bringing all these concepts together informs and challenges making everything work together, in the sense that you have to make, or at least there is an emphasis on plant-based, but there is also an emphasis on farm-to-table, and there is a bit of a kind of Latin American flavour. How did these three things work in synergy with each other, and where are the challenges in making these three concepts work seamlessly together?
I mean, the menu can not be too big. The ethos is exactly the same. It's all about sustainability. It's all about, but different flavors. So some flavors are a little more European, American. Some other flavors Latino. And then the last flavor is just working with vegetables. And with vegetables, there's I always say to my chefs, the food groups are very small. If you look at meat, you have beef, veal, pork, lamb, and then the games. Same thing with the fish. The food group are small, but when you look at the vegetables, spices and herbs, thousands of species, thousands of combinations. So, to combine those three restaurants together, it's fairly easy. Probably we have about 8 to 10 dishes of each concept under one roof. So it's fun for the customer to really pick and choose from this menu, this menu, this menu. And it's all mixed up, so it's on the end it has to be delicious.
How excited do you still get about a new opening? Obviously, you've got so many restaurants under your belt. Does it still feel special when a new one opens up? And how does it feel when you have become such a force and you have so many activities going on? Do you still get that sense of excitement? Are people going to like it?
It's so exciting, to this new hotel, a new kitchen, training a new group of young talent around us. So it's exciting, like the first restaurant I ever opened. I started cooking in 1973. I was 16 years old. Did my first apprenticeship. And here we are, 51 years later. I'm still excited about every single opening. And I like to be involved in all the architecture, in picking up the plates, picking up the dishes, picking up the lighting. I feel like I'm a frustrated architect as well myself. So I think food is all about layers and colors and texture, similar as architecture, but on top of it you can taste it.
That's very interesting. Where is the line for you in terms of how important both structure, aesthetics, texture, and flavour come together. How do all these elements have to balance each other out on a dish?
I mean, what's important is to really keep sourcing is probably the most important first, to get the right product. But, then you have to work with textures of the food. You have to take a simple radish, but you have to transform it in something not complicated, but sometimes just a little bit of salt, some bread and butter, and you have the best dish in the world. So it's about keeping it simple, sourcing the best product. First you eat with your eyes, so the plate has to look good, appetizing, has to be fresh looking, and then you want to surprise people with a little bit of a spice, a little bit of a... I try to use, I spent 5 years of my life in Asia, so I always add a little bit of a chili, a little bit of a excitement to the dish, spices, and it has to explode. You have to remember something, when you eat that dish, whatever it is. We actually do in our Latino concept, we do a guacamole, which is all avocado, but we mash some peas with it. So it's 1/3 peas mashed with avocado. Same seasoning, lime juice, scallion, jalapeno. But it becomes a new guacamole because of the peas, the two green vegetables together. It's a match in heaven.
Let's rewind to 1973. What kind of food did you grow up eating? And what kind of food did you fall in love with? And what kind of food did you cook when you first started?
I was very lucky because, I was a drop-off of school. So I left school at 16. My parents wanted me become an engineer or somehow to take over the business. And it was a cold business, heating business, and I hated it. So I wanted to go, when you're 16, you want to leave your home, you want to live your life, and you're too young, but it's still, you want to do that. I started an apprenticeship in Alsace, where I come from, and Alsace is all about potato, cabbage, roast pork, and really heavy, rich food with foie gras and all kind of things like that. So when I started my apprenticeship, I was 16 in a 3-star Michelin, L'Auberge de Lille in Alsace. They were very smart. They put me in pastry first, because pastry is an exact science. You have to really measure everything, put everything on a scale. It's not just they let a young apprentice to go in the kitchen and just start cooking. So I had to put everything on a scale. Just to do a simple vanilla ice cream, you have to measure the sugar, measure the milk, the eggs. You have a technique of cooking it. So everything was on a scale for the first 6 months. I had to measure everything, because pastry is an exact science, and it doesn't work if the souffle doesn't go up if you don't use the right proportion. So there was a smart way of starting me to... So now today, I still have that in my mind. When I develop a recipe, I measure everything. Everything goes on a scale. Because to be consistent, to repeat the same dish all the time, you have to be consistent. If I cook at home for some friends and I'll put nothing on the scale, in a restaurant we put everything on the scale to make sure that if you capture a flavor of something and you want to come back for it. We create cravings that we want people to come back and to be consistent about it.
That's interesting. You've already compared your cooking in some ways to architecture, and then you're saying now it's quite a precise science. I wonder, how much is precision important in your approach to cooking? And how much of it does it move you in the heart still? How does it feel when you cook?
It feels amazing. That's I guess maybe that's all the thing I know to do is to cook. But the combinations excites me. Yes, I take I take organic chicken, but then if I season it with some licorice, it becomes a new chicken. If I take some asparagus and add something special to it, like mint, it becomes a new asparagus. So for me, it's about finding the right product, get excited about it, and then make it different. Yes, it's a British asparagus, but if I roast it with morel mushroom, add some dry sherry in it, and a little bit of mint, it becomes a new asparagus. So my role as a chef is to come up with new taste that's gonna be that you're gonna remember and you're gonna come back for it.
Where does this inspiration for these surprises come from? How important is it to travel around? And how important for your cuisine do you think it is to borrow things from everywhere that you go?
That's the most important. For me, traveling is my inspiration. So we have a restaurant in Kyoto, in Tokyo, Shanghai, Singapore. So I go to Asia probably 3 to 4 times a year. I bring some new dishes for them to test at the restaurants and to propose to their guests. But I come back with like 40 ideas when I go to Tokyo or Kyoto. So I go to the market, I test some new spice, some new combinations. And going out to a restaurant, you always come back with I come back from one of those trips, it's like I have 40 new things in my head I want to explore and try. And so it never stops. The sky is the limit.
Well, I'm always fascinated by this when I speak to chefs who oversee such a vast array of restaurants. How involved can you be, and how difficult is it to pass the baton to somebody else? You know, to a certain extent, it's still so linked to you, but where is that relationship between the fact that it reflects your identity, but also you have to trust someone so much that you just have to let them run with it?
Absolutely. I mean, we have our chef here, Ben, who's for ABC Kitchens, for example. He's going to be British talent, so he's going to be, who's already been sourcing all the vegetables for us. So it's about transmitting the how, but then let him run with it too, It's going to be his personality on the menu. It's very important to let go a little bit of yourself, to have somebody next to you, you're going to teach what you know, the know-how, and then he's going to teach you his approach on exercise. So it's a collaboration when you do many restaurants, it's to coming to London and working with those young talents. You really have to let them go, a little bit. So I give the idea, I give this is the first menu we're going to start it with because we know it. We developed it already in New York. But then Ben's going to really take it to the next level.
I guess I want to ask you how important it is for you to have the recognition. How important is it for chefs to genuinely get awarded things? And where is your relationship with the pressure that puts on a restaurant? Do you think that it's important to get accolades, or would you rather focus on yourself, what you're doing, and forget about everything else?
I think I love to focus on what we do and what the food that we put on the plate. The accolades if the food is good and you have a great concept and a great restaurant, good service, it's multiple things. The accolades come after. So it's never a given. Each time you open a new restaurant, you start from the ground up and build something that you want to make sure it lasts forever. I mean, we have some restaurants in New York who my first restaurant I ever opened in JoJo was opened in 91, still thriving. So the most important is doing things that are timeless. I always talk to my chefs I mentioned River Cafe, who exists, I think, for 38 years. That's a perfect example of, we kind of have a relation here because Richard Rogers was the husband of Ruthie. And I think the River Cafe is a good example in London that's lasting, delicious, friendly, a place you always want to go back. So on creating a restaurant like that, it's forever.
Well, that's very interesting. How do you ensure that somewhere can stay relevant for that long? From 1991 to now, how do you make sure that the restaurant can stay true to itself, but also evolve and continue thriving? What's the recipe?
It's very simple, just keep what you created, what made it popular and famous at the time. The customer will do that, but then the customer change too. They go to new places, etc. So we have to make sure that the quality is there, that the service, the friendliness is there, that people always come back. It's when people say one day they don't remember anything after the meal, you lost. So even if they remember the flowers on the table, this weather, this drink, sometimes it's just not just only the food, it's the entire place that brings you back. We're creating memories that we want people to come back.
Jean-Georges Vongerichten there, speaking to me in the studio at Midori House. This is the menu. Next up on the menu, it's the last Friday of the month, so we're joined by Monocle's sub-editor and in-house wine expert Chloé Lake for her pick of wine of the month. This week, we're trying Morgon Le Délit 2021 by Daniel Bouland. Chloé, what a joy to have you back in the studio 1 month later. We're ready for another tip. You got to give it to us.
I know. I'm very excited to be back again. Tip number 2. So we're starting off strong again this month. I have a very exciting red to share with you.
This is quite an interesting choice because at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're very much heading into summer now, or somewhere it is very much summer, not perhaps in London. A red is not a usual choice for a summer tipple, but...
It's really not, but this is why I decided to go with it. I thought it's a little bit unusual. Instead of opting for rosé or white or something sparkling, I thought light-bodied red. lightly chilled. It's a bit controversial at the moment. Some people don't like to chill their reds, but
it's very fashionable. People, some people are really into chilled reds at the moment, and clearly you're pro.
Well, I did put this in the fridge about 20 minutes ago, but it's feeling a little bit warm, but that's okay. So
what level of chilledness are we looking for? First of all, what is it that we're about to drink, and what kind of temperature would you recommend we drink it at?
Both good questions. So I'd recommend something that's been in the fridge maybe about 20 minutes before you serve it. That's going to bring it down a little bit, make it nice and refreshing. That's if you want a chilled red. Obviously, you can just leave it out if not. But today we have this very delightful wine from Morgon, which is in the Burgundy region of France, a Beaujolais, so we're going to expect a really kind of nice light red. It's 100% Gamay grape, and as I've said, you'd kind of expect light to medium-bodied wines from this grape. It has a very thin skin, which means that when it's fermenting, it doesn't get a lot of tannins and a lot of really weighty flavor, so you're going to have something that's a bit less structured.
So when it comes to chilled reds, I see Beaujolais a lot being chilled, but what kind of reds lend themselves to being put 20 minutes in the fridge?
I'd say any wine that is actually similar to Beaujolais. So maybe a Pinot Noir would also be quite nice in the fridge. Nothing that's too heavy or tannic. So if you have, I don't know, a Cabernet Sauvignon, you probably wouldn't want to put that in the fridge because it's going to be really heavy on the palate, and that's quite nice when it's a little bit warmer. Also red grapes that are grown in cooler climates, like Gamay, would work quite well. If you're having a grape that's grown in, say, South Africa or Australia where it's really hot all the time, you're going to be getting very ripe red and black fruit flavors from that wine. So you wouldn't really then want to drink it cold. It'll be a bit like drinking Ribena or juice.
Why do you think there is such an interest for this kind of wine at the moment? Is there a shift in the way that people enjoy their reds? They're discovering new regions within France. Obviously, last installment we talked about Italy and its characteristics in terms of making wine, but France is as hallowed a territory as they come, but is there still something to be discovered within France itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. With France, as I said last time, they have so many rules about how they make their wine, and really the rest of Europe does as well. But with Beaujolais, I think what makes it interesting is they're quite well known for Beaujolais Nouveau, so that's the young grapes, and the wines are meant to be drunk young. They're not normally wines that you'd age in a cellar for 10 to 15 years. And I think for a long time, people were put off by that because they didn't see the wines as good. Whereas now people are realizing that this grape has a lot more to offer. There's a lot of natural winemakers coming up in the region, a lot of people experimenting with more traditional styles, but with this grape. So yeah, there are different things going on in France right now, I think. They're taking this grape to sort of new levels with traditional methods and things.
I'm primed. Shall we?
Yeah, I'm so ready.
Pop the cork.
Such a nice sound.
And the colour is amazing. It's this real ruby red, but it's not too dark.
Yeah, it's really nice. Again, it's kind of what you'd expect. It's light, but not super dark. It's kind of that ruby garnet colour. That's coming from the thin skins as well. Not too much color.
Okay, what about the nose?
Okay, ooh, give it a twirl.
Sorry, I just went straight in. I haven't passed that certificate yet. Oh God, this is pure joy in a red for me.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a lot of kind of like ripe red fruit from this. So cherry.
Definitely cherry, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of cherry, some maybe like plum as well, and a bit of black fruit. So maybe sort of like a not ripe blackberry.
I'm going to follow you on that. I'm going to just say yes to everything you say. You know this, right? I'm not going to go like, actually tobacco. But no, I can tell that this is not smoky. This is very much
this is not super
upper.
Smoky. And you are very right on that because this is actually aged in oak barrels, but not oak barrels that have been torched. So normally when producers use them, they go through this process where with the new ones, they kind of put them in this like blaze of fire, and it imparts this very smoky taste on the wine that ages in the barrels. But these barrels then get used over and over again, and over time they lose that smoky flavor. So this is probably in those old barrels. So it doesn't have a great deal of that sort of like tobacco leather. It's just it's more neutral, I'd say. Yeah.
It's bright, but it's not without soul, which I like.
Yeah. Should we give it a taste?
Yeah, let's do it.
I can see you're
I'm
going for it.
raring. I'm chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's phenomenal.
Great. Okay, good.
She's done good.
Good stuff. Yeah, that
so
is
talk to
nice.
us about it. I mean, this is the absolute like platonic ideal of an easy drinking red.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This is why I picked this. You can chill it. It's juicy. It's fruity. It's summery. Yes, it's a red, but when it's like this, you can enjoy it anytime, I think. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Great fruit concentration. This is the grapes are grown on granite soils. So like last month's wine, they hold a lot of their flavor because they're really fighting for that water in the soil. So yeah, you are left with this wine that is full of fruit and really vibrant, young, fresh flavors.
You'd be hard pushed to find someone who understands that well-worn adage, cooking is an art and baking a science, better than Nicola Lamb. After jumping into the world of baking in her early 20s, the pastry chef cut her teeth at some of the best-known New York and London bakeries, including Dominique Ansel and Ottolenghi. It was from these experiences she formed her rigorous approach, which is primarily based on technical accuracy and the chemistry of combining sugar, flour, eggs and more. Her new cookbook, Sift, The Elements of Great Baking, spotlights her unique style in a thick volume that some might refer to as a definitive baking Bible. Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs spoke to Nicola to find out more.
I think there are a few sort of points in my life that I could go back to. I think it's always fascinating to have those, when I was on my grandmother's knee and I saw her baking. It wasn't quite like that. I really enjoyed baking with my nanny Carol, who I've actually dedicated the book to. And I do have great memories of baking with her, but I wouldn't say that was the sort of moment where I knew. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s when I realised that I really wanted a job where everything was much more tangible. I'd been working in office jobs and I loved the idea of working in a field where you could really see the product that you were making. You could consume it and then you would start again. I think there was this beautiful cycle of how ephemeral it was, and I just sort of love this idea that you go into work, you make these things, you give it to someone, it gives someone joy, it's gone and you start again. And so I started making birthday cakes for people, and that was in my early 20s, and that was when I decided, when I was about 22, to make the jump into doing it professionally. I just thought, why not? If it doesn't work out, then that's okay, but at least I've given it a go. So it was in my 20s where I decided to go to pastry school. It did drop out after a few months, and that's a different story. But it really, that was the push that I needed to move into baking. And I think a lot of people thought that, you should keep it as just something that you like to do as a hobby. But actually, when I got into kitchens, I was loving those 10 to 12 to 14-hour days. I loved doing the same thing over and over again. I loved carrying massive bags of flour up the stairs. I thought it was all so fun. And so that was really the moment, I guess, from my early 20s.
And so then you worked in a few different places, and were you kind of picking up lots of different like tricks and influences, and how did that kind of shape what the things you enjoyed baking were, and your sort of interests in terms of, what was kind of coming out of the oven?
Totally. So I guess this does relate to me dropping out of pastry school. Once I realised that I was learning a lot more in the kitchen, I was able to create my own curriculum, I suppose, with the jobs that I was taking. So when I really wanted to learn about a fancy petit gâteau, I went and worked in a super fancy French patisserie. And then when I wanted to learn about croissants, I went and worked in a huge wholesale bakery. And then when I wanted to do sourdough, I'd moved to the sourdough team. So I was able to kind of manufacture this sort of pastry school through working, which was really cool. And like you said, I was learning so much from the people who were teaching me in person. So the bakers that would stand next to me as I rolled a croissant or, watched as my jam was getting thicker and thicker and told me when it was time to turn it off. I was learning so much from those teachers. And I think throughout the book, I always credit the teachers. And I think that's also why I wanted to write this book, because I wanted to pass on all of those amazing nuggets that had been given to me. They felt like such gifts, and I think you can find them online dotted around, but I really wanted to just put everything that I'd learned from all those different teachers, from all the different books I'd read, from my own investigations and experimentation. I write a weekly newsletter about recipe development, and I've done quite a lot of research into, what factors you can change. So putting all of those things together in one book felt important to me, because it was also the kind of book that I wanted when I first started in baking, and I didn't quite know where to look for the information.
Picking up on that one, there is so much information here. It's obviously gathered from so many places and people. And one thing that stands out about the book is how scientific it is. You really go into sort of every ingredient and how it works and how it changes the consistency of what you're making. And yeah, you've got a really kind of scientific, very kind of technical approach. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how sort of important science is to baking, and when you realised that, and how that kind of informed the book.
Totally. So I always say baking is magical but not magic. And I think there's this brilliant processes that you get to watch when you're making a meringue, and it goes from this cloudy mixture to this amazing, billowy, beautiful cloud. Not cloudy anymore. It's an opaque, amazing white. And I think those processes, people sort of go, it just happens. It just happens. Well, it does just happen, but there's a reason. And when you start learning about why that happens, you can then apply it to why you might want to make a meringue and then fold that into your cake mixture. It's all the same kind of things. Like, I wanted to provide people with the building blocks to understand what's happening in their recipes. I think a lot of people fear baking, and they just go, well, I just have to read the recipe, and if I deviate at all from it, then it will fail, and I will have failed. And in some recipes, that is true. Some things are really specific, but I really want people to be able to look at a recipe and an ingredients list and go, okay, that person has put in 2 egg yolks instead of a whole egg. Why? And now they can sort of understand, okay, does that make it richer? Does it make it more crumbly? Does it give it more colour? All of these ingredients have exactly the same process of thought than if you were to be just adding some spice into a curry you were making. It's all the sort of same things, but I think people sometimes apply this fear around baking, and I really wanted to go, it's actually not scary. Ingredients do one of 2 things or one of 3 things when you apply heat to them or you whip them. You just have to know, and then you can create your own things, and you can kind of go into more complicated recipes without fear, and even with excitement and curiosity.
One example of a thing that people might have fear around making is croissants, which you say is your favourite thing to bake. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about why they're your favourite and how they're maybe not as scary as people think. I'm not sure.
Totally. So croissants are along with meringue, they are one of like the ultimate transformations in baking. The fact that you can take this kind of slab of kind of beige looking dough, wrap butter in it, and then give some folds, and then suddenly you get this beautiful like architectural crispy thing with all these layers in it, and it's so beautiful, and it just comes from these 2 sort of brown beigey blocks of nothingness, and this amazing thing happens. So that's one of the reasons that I really, really love making them. I spent a lot of time making them and sort of really getting to understand the process. And I will say croissants are not as scary as you think, but you also have to be prepared. And I think this is something that people really struggle with in baking. You have to be prepared for it to maybe not look exactly like the croissant that the first time you make them. The croissant might not look like the one you get from your favourite bakery down the road. And that's okay. I think people really have these quite extreme standards for themselves when they set out to make a cake or to make croissants, and they're so quickly to say that was a failure, I had to throw it in the bin, or didn't look very good. And so the thing about croissants is you can make them. It's not your fault if your kitchen's a bit warm and maybe you don't realise that the butter is smearing, and maybe they're not going to be quite as flaky. Maybe they're going to be slightly heavier than you're used to. But repetition is so key when you're baking. And that's why for something like croissants in this book, because it's aimed at home baking, even though I think quite a lot of bakeries have got this as well, which is amazing to see it like on their shelves. But I've really reduced the croissant recipe to be very, very small. And even though it might seem silly to make just 4 croissants, which is what my recipe makes, that will actually give you much better chances of success. And if you want to make 8 croissants, you just make 2 batches, because by reducing the size, what we're doing is making it easier for you to roll things out. You're not having to clear off your whole kitchen table to make something. And so in Sift, it's all about kind of taking those more complicated actions, making bite-size or smaller or more manageable versions of them, so then you can learn and apply them and kind of grow as a baker in your own home.
Thank you, Sophie. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show Food Neighborhoods for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiara Rimella. This programme was produced by Monica Lillis and our sound engineer was Flynn Simons. Thanks for listening, and until next week.